Hello and welcome to the Weather Studio Live. It's 1 o'clock, it's Tuesday, we're broadcasting live from the Met Office. I'm Alex Deakin.
I'm Aidan McGivern. Next to me is Claire Nazir.
Oh, hello there. Yes, please send in your comments and questions on YouTube, on Twitter, or even on Facebook. I don't know what your social platform is of choice, but mine is YouTube today. And yes, I'll be taking those questions and obviously listening to the wise words of the boys.
You will also be taking questions on Facebook and Twitter.
I mean, all of them.
You're going to be inclusive.
Inclusive.
It's just your favourite. Happens
well,
to be today.
Well, today it is because I'm enjoying the yoga, basically, on YouTube. It doesn't seem to happen on Twitter.
Okay.
But anyway, back to the moment in hand. It's all about the weather today. What's coming up, chaps?
Yes, we are talking about the UK weather. We've finally seen some snow.
Yeah.
Will there be any more in the longer term? We're going to look at things high up in the atmosphere as well, stratosphere, and talk a little bit about the press release last week about carbon dioxide increase globally and the forecast for this year as well.
That's right, but it's been a wintry start to the new week, and we've had some fabulous pictures sent in to us. Our Met Office Twitter account. This was sterling overnight. Thank you to Fraser GJ. Well, beautiful wintry scenes. Not unusual, of course.
And not unusual.
Not unusual
to get
a bit of snow in Stirling in January, but
we haven't seen it. So it's just nice.
A rare sight this winter.
It is just nice to reflect on that. Some beautiful, beautiful scenes. This is an absolute cracker, this, isn't it? Look at that. Look at that. Just gorgeous. Thank you, Chad Weather, for sending. And you can always send
Peak
us
District.
photos. If you follow us on Twitter, you can always send us some. We love seeing all your weather photos, but this one's particularly stunning from this morning. Not a huge amount of snow, but just a
Scotland's
dusting.
seen plenty. Loch Lomond.
Where was that Chad Weather one? Sorry, just a big... That was
Dovestone Reservoir, Peak District, on the outskirts of Greater Manchester. So
and
lovely.
This is Loch Lomond, dusting of snow there over the mountains. A bit more, 4 to 6 centimetres quite widely on the higher parts of western Scotland this morning. A bit more on some of the higher peaks as well, and dust down to relatively low levels. There was a covering in some spots this morning also.
Not everyone's seen it. It's been a cold start to the week. Places like London, southern counties of England, South Wales, not a great deal, but at the higher ground, actually, Dartmoor saw a centimetre or two. Saw some lovely scenes on a webcam earlier. Nothing compared to this, though.
1 or 2 centimetres in the UK compared to... now that is a dump, isn't it? That is a big dump of snow. 95 centimetres.
Yeah, incredible imagery that came out last week from an epic snowstorm in Newfoundland. What started out as incredible footage ended up with 300 personnel from the military being drafted in to help with people who were essentially trapped in their homes because the snow buried them, and images of people opening their door.
You saw that one earlier of that guy with his garage door. It must have been 6 foot worth of snow. Just incredible, absolutely incredible scenes. And there's similar amounts there as well.
And you might think, well, surely we should get more snow. We're a cold part of the world. Somewhere that is often thought of as a hot part of the world, Iraq. They've had an incredible amount of snow. Obviously, this is a mountainous region, Kurdistan, but cars buried in the white stuff there. Cold snap, I think in the last few days for the likes of western and northern parts of Iraq, Turkey, Lebanon, Syria, a number of places saw some snow.
Absolutely fascinating stuff. We've just had a little bit, but it is we're getting a bit excited because it is the first kind of stuff we've seen properly so far this winter down to any kind of low levels, really. The big question, I guess, are we going to see any more? What's it looking like, Aidan? This is the satellite image for 24 hours.
This is overnight last night, and we've had the jet stream to the south of the UK. The snow has come in from the west. You often think of the north or the east as a cold direction. This is coming from the west, but it's actually coming from Greenland via the west. So it's coming very, very cold air over Greenland at the moment, as minus double digits. That air then moves over the Atlantic, and because it's warmed by the sea underneath it, it starts to bubble up, and we've just seen all these snow showers across northern and western parts of Britain. Sleet and hail at lower levels, snow over the higher ground, or even down to relatively modest levels. But we've still got that weather with us at the moment, but through the rest of the day, essentially, we can expect the air to gradually become a little less cold. And so this is how it's looking. Middle of the afternoon, there was a pretty lively shower outside here.
Now it's gloriously sunny, so we're getting that sunshine and showers in the southwest. But although there's been a bit of hail and like you say, there's some snow earlier over Dartmoor, wasn't there? The showers now down here are all turning back to rain. But still some in western Scotland the rest of today.
Yeah, typically above around 300 metres by the time we get to later today. Is that snow level is rising. So still overnight a build-up of snow over the mountains of Scotland, but I think the snow at lower levels, if you've had snow at lower levels for northern England, Northern Ireland and across Scotland, I think that will gradually disappear during the next 24 hours. It will be really a high ground affair by the time.
Could be still some on the M62 overnight tonight and those showers coming down. I guess the biggest issue will be across Scotland again and again. You know, absolutely nothing unusual about that this time of year. Snow on the mountains in Scotland.
Yeah, so some icy patches high up, but for many places the showers are dying away ever so slowly, and for large parts of central, southern, eastern Britain it's looking bright, crisp start tomorrow, 1 or 2 degrees on the thermometer, but
it's cold air, but not exceptionally cold air. It feels cold as well because you've got a brisk wind and it's that polar maritime air. It's coming down from Greenland, so it's cold air. The wind really does make it feel quite chilly as well, even though temperatures overnight not going to be that much of a widespread frost. Not like a week or so ago when we had high pressure, light winds, and then the temperature at night just really dropped away. The air's more mixed because there's more breeze, so you don't get those really low temperatures. But it does feel colder because of the wind, because that air is so dry.
Yeah, those are the kinds of numbers for tomorrow morning, and tomorrow is going to end up being a slightly milder day, ever so slightly, because the next system's moving in, and tomorrow's the changeover day, isn't it?
Yeah. So if you're expecting or hoping the cold weather's going to stay, we're going to see more snow. Not really, is it? This is a weather system coming in. Instead of coming down from the northwest, the wind's now coming up from the southwest, and it's just going to turn milder again.
Yeah, some snow over the mountains on the leading edge of that, but essentially it's just turning everything back to rain. And by later on Wednesday, let's just show you the pressure pattern there. We've got all sorts of stuff queuing up, waiting to come in from the Atlantic. This one's the main feature, this low coming in for Wednesday night and into Thursday. That's going to bring a lot of wet weather, especially to western parts of Scotland, over the higher ground, northwest England, Northern Ireland. This little thing will run across southern counties of England.
It's a messy situation, isn't it? Those 3 little areas of low pressure all coming in. So there's a degree of uncertainty about timing of rain bands and stuff like that, but the overall pattern is set. We're going to see the shift to milder and more changeable weather for the next few days.
Yeah, we were looking at this yesterday because there was more uncertainty yesterday in terms of, if you trace it back, this area of low pressure here explosively deepening in the West Atlantic, and how that was expected to introduce ripples in the jet stream. And you can see the jet stream becoming a little bit ripply there. But there was a small chance when we were looking at it yesterday that the jet stream will be pointed slightly differently and help to deepen this area of low pressure and send it across southern parts of the UK. But now it looks more likely, which it was looking very likely yesterday, but now it's looking pretty certain that this low will be the main feature across northern Britain. But this will just bring an area of rain for a time for Thursday as it runs in. So yeah, everything lined up there. The jet stream is back with a vengeance.
See that low deepening as part of the jet stream, but again it's going to go to the northwest and leave us in the milder airflow. So yeah, by Thursday and Friday, apart from the tops of the Scottish mountains, snow is no longer a talking point really.
Yeah, we're back into the mild air. Double figures on Thursday, and essentially the weather is just changeable into the weekend, isn't it?
Changeable and mild, so chopping and changing day by day. A bit of sunshine, but not especially cold. The wind's going to be a feature of the weather throughout this week, really. Well, it was comparatively last week when we had high pressure and the winds were finally pretty light, having been a very blustery year so far. So yes, it's going to be back to much milder, much more changeable day-on-day variations. Nothing too significant, doesn't look like, in terms of warnings for wind or rain.
Yeah.
But obviously we'll be keeping our eyes on that. But yeah, we're back to that kind of mild. Will it change again? Well, we're not even into February yet, so there's still time. But yes, if you're a big snow lover, well, I hope you enjoyed this morning if you got some. Claire, any questions coming in?
Lots of questions and comments coming in. A comment from Hardwar UK on YouTube. Warmer, wetter winters were predicted by climate scientists. They seem right. We'll certainly do. December 2019, the UK temperature was about 1.3 degrees above average, but also forecasts that the winters will become wetter, and certainly we have seen that as well. Some places, particularly eastern parts of England, saw double their average rainfall through December. It's chopped and changed through January, but we did see some heavy rain through the first part of the month. We'll see what happens there. It's almost the end of the month. Warm winters should mean warmer seas this year. I want to bodyboard a lot more, and that comes from Carl Madge on YouTube again. Well, don't we all want to be in the sea? Not this time of year, though. Sea surface temperatures on the east coast are around 8 degrees Celsius at the moment, and there's certainly a lag time from the heat or the lack of heat across the seas and the oceans to it responding within the body of water. And so we tend to get our lowest sea surface temperatures across the UK around February into early March. So yes, they could dip a little bit lower, but whether they're as low as last year, I haven't looked at those figures, but it'd be worth looking at, actually, quite interesting. Chris A on YouTube, this is a comment which I think we have perhaps satisfied today. I think you should consider having some viewers' photos through the week at a segment at the end of the live stream. Well, we do love viewers' photos. We do use them on Instagram in particular every day. It's always a nice photo of the day. So please do send them in, and maybe we will include that through the next few weeks. Things such as rain, snow, sun, light rays, etc. I know where you're coming from, Chris, I really do. Amy Womble, hello there on Facebook. Have you changed your mind about snow for the south this winter? Snow meaning proper snow. Well, as the boys were saying, we saw a little dash of snow down towards the south, particularly over the higher ground over the last 24 hours, but things tend to just resort back to a less cold situation, more in the way of rain. However, could change again next week. We'll talk about that in a moment.
We've not changed our mind either, because we've never been forecasting snow.
Yeah, thank you very much, Aidan. There's Aidan Loftus. Hi, Claire. Hi, Aidan. Is it true that it could turn very cold next week? Well, we do have a change of air type next week, and I'm teasing that because that is something we will be talking about. And finally, before I go back and hand back to the boys, it's Stevie Wells 74 on YouTube. I hear in the second part of February there could be an SSW happening, and this could result in having an east wind. Well, there's two aspects of that, two components to that, which we were just discussing just before the show, and we will be illuminated by the wise words of the boys in just a moment. So keep your comments and questions flying through, and I'll just keep on reading them out and seeing if I can add any substance or value to them.
You always do, Claire, you always do. Thank you very much for that. Just to add one point, Dr. Mark McCarthy, our stats guy, our stats guru, suggested that as it turns milder through the end of this week into the weekend, we could be in the top 5 warmest Januaries on record. So we were just flagging that. The January stats will be out next week, of course, but it could be, up there in the top 5. Yes, SSW, a bit of discussion about that on social media recently. Particularly over the course of the weekends. We'll talk a bit more about what SSW actually is, but the one particular computer model was suggesting that this could happen, and this is an example. This was the charts that we saw on Sunday from the GFS, the American model. I show it because I think it looks a bit like a kind of a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. That was what really drew me attention. I don't know. Michelangelo. Which was the blue one? I can't remember. But yes, this was a projection for the end of this week from the American model and this is high up above the atmosphere, in the stratosphere, high up above the pole. So you can see North America there, Africa there. This is the pole, and it's suggesting, what this is suggesting is that the stratospheric polar vortex may be breaking down somewhat, may show some warming higher up in the atmosphere, which is SSW, sudden stratospheric warming. And it was just one suggestion over the weekend, and that American model is still suggesting it still could happen. So people get excited about it. Why do people get excited about it? Because it can be an indication, sudden stratospheric warming, that then ripples its way slowly down through the atmosphere, and it can then lead to easterly winds setting up across the UK. Doesn't always happen, but it can happen. So there's a lot of things to happen. This is just like the first element in a chain reaction of things that can lead 3 or 4 weeks later to us getting a cold spell of weather and potentially easterly winds and potentially therefore some snow. So people do monitor this very regularly and get quite excited about it. So this was just one computer model. This is the American computer model. We've been speaking to our scientist here, Jeff Knight, who is I must get his title right. I've got it written down here. He's the manager of the modelling climate variability team. He's been on the show, friend of the show. He was on in December talking about when there was talk of SSW again then. And he's been on on, and he's been looking at our computer model, again, high up in the atmosphere. And although some because they run the model lots of times, and some of the outcomes suggest it's a possibility, only around about 10-15%. So at the moment, the word from the Met Office is that the chance of this happening is pretty slim. The polar vortex, the SPV, has been particularly strong this year as well. So it's probably going to take at least a couple of goes of this warming or to get it wobbling, to get it out of shape, because it has been so strong. So it's unlikely in the next sort of week or so. Overall, it's still pretty unlikely. The message throughout the rest of the winter is that the polar vortex is likely to remain generally intact. So at the moment, it's just a small chance. But obviously, things can change. It's something we'll be keeping a close eye on. But just wanted to address that because there has been a lot of chat on social media about it.
Yeah, and when this has happened before, when we've had a stratospheric warming before, we know about it from Jeff. He comes and speaks to us because it's really significant, but he's not flagging the big chance of it happening in the immediate future. So, and of course, it tends to happen eventually towards the end of winter. Well, in the start of spring, doesn't it? It happens and it breaks down properly. It happens every year. By then, you don't get cold weather because it's into the middle of spring. Even if we got an easterly wind now, beast from the east, it wouldn't really be a beast from the east. We're just looking at the temperatures to the east of the UK because we've had so many westerly winds across the whole of Europe. It's about 8 to 10 degrees milder than average across the likes of southern parts of Scandinavia, eastern and central Europe. So if overnight the winds suddenly came from the east, it wouldn't be that cold. It wouldn't be as cold as it was a couple of years ago when we had the beast from the east.
It would be a fairly weak beast, a feeble beastie. If none of that last 5 minutes made any sense to you, sudden stratospheric warming and stratospheric polar vortex, go and watch this explainer, which is on our sister channel, Learn About Weather, isn't it? It explains everything about what sudden stratospheric warming is, how it happens, and the impacts that it can lead to across the UK and across the Northern Hemisphere generally. But just to reiterate, at the moment, it's only a small chance of that happening in February. And as Aidan just pointed out, even if it did, even if you've got an easterly winds, it's not particularly cold across Siberia at the moment. It's cold, but it's not especially cold. In fact, it is significantly above average. So yeah, go and check that video out. It's really interesting. And if anything does develop, if things do change, we'll probably get Jeff on the show because he's keen to talk about it as well. So yes, make sure you stay tuned, but keep sending in your questions also. And of course, just because we don't get a sudden stratospheric warming, just because we don't get an easterly, doesn't mean there won't be further snow across the UK. There could be further colder interludes. And actually next week, we could easily get a northerly wind, which could bring some snow showers across the UK to some areas. And
because that polar vortex has been so strong this winter, all the cold air is locked up over the North Pole. That's why it's so mild to the east of the UK. So actually our coldest wind direction at the moment would be from the north, potentially, rather than the east, at least if it happened overnight.
And there are some suggestions of getting a bit of a northerly next week.
Yeah.
That's all for now. Claire, have you got any more questions?
Yes, I have. Lee Stewart on YouTube. When it's clear skies, it's frosty and obviously high pressure. We saw that earlier this week. High pressure is in control, but when it snows, there's obviously more cloud, but temperatures are still low. How can that be? Well, that's all to do with where our wind is coming from, what our air mass is doing, and what we are inheriting from different directions. So, yes, when the skies are clear overnight during winter, any heat from the day radiates away very, very quickly, and we see a real drop in temperature, and it can lead to a frost. But even when we see cloudier skies, that can trap the cold air underneath, particularly on a gloomy high, which we saw over the last week or so. So yes, it does depend on local conditions and where the air mass is coming from. Maritz Opala on YouTube, you guys are so lucky. No snow here in the Netherlands, just 4 degrees and rain. Well, that's not a nice combination, is it? 4 degrees and rain, probably very low cloud as well. Yes, some of us saw some lovely snow first thing this morning. Not great if you were travelling, and yes, a little bit more forecast through the next 24 hours before the trend is for slightly milder air. And I've just emailed the main man himself, that's Mark McCarthy, because we did have a question in saying what year was the warmest January on record? And that was from Robert Taylor, who also comments that he likes your shirts today and he thinks I'm looking very smart. So thank you very much, Robert. And Mark has just emailed in, hot off the press, 2007 was the second warmest with 5.9, but the warmest was 1916 with an average temperature of 6.3 degrees Celsius. So it's been over 100 years since we've had or broken that record. Will it happen this month? Possibly not. Around the 5th, you're saying?
Yeah. I just speaking to Mark the other day. He said we're nowhere near. We're
nowhere near it.
Nowhere near the top, but we're likely to be in the top 10 and could be in the top 5 if this weekend is mild.
However, what we are seeing is CO2 levels rising and rising further. And yes, there's a new report out talking about that, isn't there?
Yes, we actually issued a report last week, Met Office press release last Friday, which some of the newspapers picked up. And we've had a lot of questions actually, because we've covered the Australian wildfires on this quite a bit since the turn of the year. We've done a few episodes on it, a few shows on it. And we've had a lot of questions in about how will that impact climate change and what the numbers are. And actually they did quite a bit of quick research a couple of weeks ago, and that was issued last week. And there's been quite a bit of press coverage just from Friday from The Guardian about how how CO2 levels are going to see quite a big jump this year. And the forecast for this year is that we're likely to see an increase of around 2.7 parts per million increase. Generally, as this map shows, this famous chart, the Keeling Curve, actually we've seen an increase in around about 2 parts per million ballpark since these observations were began back in 1958. The Keeling Curve, famous curve, this image from NOAA, of course, where they've been making observations of carbon dioxide on the top of a volcano in the middle of the Pacific and the Hawaiian Islands. It was chosen, it's a specific location because it's away from vegetation, it's away from large land masses, and they've been doing this really detailed study of carbon dioxide year on year, and it shows that dramatic increase over the past 50, 60 years. Really interesting, and it just shows it is a zoomed in. You can see there's an annual cycle, so the red dots is the monthly charts, and you can see that there's a natural cycle. It goes up and down, and that's to do with vegetation and the way that the Earth is split. The northern hemisphere, there's much more land, so in the northern hemisphere summer there's more vegetation, which takes up more of the carbon dioxide, which is why it drops off. So every year you get this peak in May, and then it drops off again until September. The black line is the average modelling for that, or catering for that variation day on day. You can see that rise over recent years. Now, the average rise is around about, as I say, 2 parts per million. But we're expecting this year, the paper last week was all about the forecast for this year being expected to be higher than that, 2.7 parts per million. And that, in part, is to do with the bushfires in Australia. Around about 2% of that, it's estimated, is going to be to do with the increase, both the increase in carbon dioxide from Australian bushfires, but also it's a double whammy because of the bushfires actually wipe out a lot of the vegetation, of course, in Australia, so they're unable to absorb more of the carbon dioxide. A bigger player in why we're seeing a larger jump this year is also to do with the global ecosystems and the warmth in the Pacific, which is known to have a global reduction in the uptake from vegetation of carbon dioxide. And that's thought to be around about 10%. Due to the increase this year is around about 10%. So the main driver is still humans. Increasing, burning more fossil fuels, more deforestation. So the main driver has been and will continue to be human influences, but there's year-on-year variations because of the way the ecosystems evolve and because of the planetary weather patterns. And that's thought to have increased it this year, or expected to increase it this year by around 10%, of which 2% of the whole increase is likely to be to do with those Australian bushfires. Just a remarkable piece of research that was turned around really quite quickly in the past few weeks. And you can go and read more about that. So there was an article in The Guardian, the Evening Standard as well, also Met Office press release all about that. So it's just, we're not just forecasting temperatures here, we're also looking at the atmosphere as a bigger picture.
That's interesting, very interesting. Molly XX on YouTube. Hello, Molly. Can it snow when the temperature is above 0 degrees Celsius? Well, yes, it can. In fact, we did see that last night in those heavy showers. The snow line fell even further, and you get something called evaporative cooling. So the ambient temperature may be above freezing, but yeah, you can see snow showers. And the snow line did fall. It's now rising again, but even so, we are likely to see some more snow showers over the next 24 hours or so. And this one for YouTube, because we have been discussing the Indian Ocean Dipole over the last few weeks, because it's had impacts on the forest fires, the bushfires, and the drought across Australia, but also the intense rain across Indonesia. And Saeed Ahmed on YouTube, what effect did the Indian Ocean Dipole have on our winter? Is this why the winter was so mild? And yes, these huge global patterns have a knock-on effect right across the world, don't they?
It's a really interesting area of ongoing research. How does El Nino affect? How does the Indian Ocean Dipole affect? El Nino link is a bit more established across the UK. It's a pretty weak link to our winters. Indian Ocean Dipole is an area of ongoing research, and we're hoping actually sometime this year to have another report about how the Indian Ocean Dipole is likely to affect the UK's weather through the winter and the autumn months. But all of these global weather patterns do affect everything to do with our atmosphere. It's all one big linked gas, if you like it, well, gas and of course the ocean. So it's an area of ongoing research. Indian Ocean Dipole, hopefully we'll be making a bit of an explainer, a video about that as well, which will be on our YouTube channels coming soon, as they
and
say.
we are going to be talking about it on a Mostly Weather in the next month or so as well, because I think it's something we really need to unpick, particularly after the Australian summer has ended, because it just really, I mean, we've seen what's happened, we really have, and it's been such a positive IOD, hasn't it?
Record-breaking IOD. We've talked about it a little bit. It's just the contrast in temperatures across the Indian Ocean. There's quite a few. There's a Bureau of Meteorology, our Australian counterparts have made an explainer about it. So if you want to find out, that's another good source to go to. There's another really good Mostly Weather, speaking of Mostly Weather, about the Keeling Curve. Podcast. Mostly Weather podcast about the Keeling Curve that was last year, wasn't it? Because it must have been the 60th anniversary last year.
So we had Professor Charles Keeling, the son of Ralph Keeling came in. The father was Charles Keeling. The Keeling Curve is the golden standard when it comes to CO2 measurements, and in the observatory in Hawaii was founded back in the 1950s, so they've had consistent readings for the Northern Hemisphere of CO2 levels since then. And his son came to the Met Office, so we were able to get a brilliant interview with him. That's on our podcast, and we've got one on sea level which has been published, and another one which we're recording tomorrow, which is all about weather and films, which these two will be involved in, and that will be coming out very soon as well. Before I finish on questions and comments, there's been a lot of questions and comments about snow, and it's something which we do really need to reiterate. As Aidan has said, we never really forecast any proper snow for this winter. Every week we're saying, well, it doesn't look like it's likely, and we seem like we've just had a bit of a dump here and there, but things are changing and it's turning milder, isn't it?
Yeah, there are some very clever newspaper headlines that you often see shared on Facebook that say they get around it. They're not technically untrue, but they get around it by saying things like, here you can find out what the Met Office say about snow, and then you have to click on the article to get to the bit where it says the Met Office aren't forecasting snow. So when you see headlines that say things like that, the Met Office are not necessarily forecasting snow. You can find out what the Met Office are forecasting, of course, by following us on social media.
Look at that.
So, yeah, always double check with us. You can ask us a question on Twitter. You can say, is it true? Are you forecasting snow? Rather than just hearing the rumours about the Met Office forecasting snow this weekend when actually it's mainly over the Highlands or whatever. So, yeah.
We'll have more on next week's forecast and the potential for a northerly wind, and that could bring a few snow showers here and now. I'll have more on that in the 10-day trend tomorrow. But yeah, make sure you're following us across all the social media platforms. Do keep sending your questions in, even if you're not watching this live. Do give us a thumbs up. Do tell your friends about us as well. The Weather Studio Live, we're here every Tuesday, and we love answering your questions, feedback, anything you want us to explain about weather and about climate, then just do please get in touch, and we'll try and answer as many as we can. But from us for now, I think that's it. So we'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.